Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel Cush and today I'm sharing my twin birth video, kind of just a big recap of what happened. I'm gonna try to keep it a little shorter. I had done a short video in the hospital on IG. I had uploaded it to my channel already, kind of going over what had happened. But there was just a really long journey. I was in the hospital for 8 days. The boys left after 4. And so while I was recovering from complications, they were already home. But I kind of wanted to just come on and like talk about some of the things that happened. I'm not a doctor or really good with all the terminology, so forgive me if I don't exactly know what everything is called. I also was very out of it for a lot of it, so some of the stuff is blurry, some of the stuff was told to me. I'm just kind of relaying what I remember of my birth and kind of the recovery afterwards. So I had my twin boys at 35 and 3 days. They were 4 pounds 14 ounces and 5 pounds 2 ounces. They came out super healthy. The week leading up to that, probably week 34, I lost my mucus plug. And I also just want to warn anyone who's kind of squeamish. I will be talking about things in this video that maybe are not as like, you know, maybe you would not be comfortable with. So just remember, this is a birth video, so I'm going to go through all the things I do remember about birth, and it's not always pretty. So just a heads up, if you have a uneasy stomach, there was a lot of throwing up. At 34 weeks, I also got a steroid shot because, actually at 33 weeks, I'd gotten a steroid shot because I'd already gone into preterm labor at 32 weeks, and we were trying to make it to 36 weeks at least. So I got a steroid shot to help the twins' lungs develop. I then lost my mucus plug, I think right before week 34. And then the beginning of week 35, which was a Saturday, I had friends in town and I really started to feel sick. I was super sick in the first trimester. And so the second trimester was like okay, but the third trimester, while I had really bad heartburn and I was like kind of like uncomfortable, lots of Braxton Hicks contractions, I definitely, the very last couple days, the week leading up to it, actually, my fatigue was just in overdrive. I had trouble getting out of bed. I was having Braxton Hicks contractions regularly that were hard to walk through, but they were not consistent. I was only basically swimming for exercise and to kind of relieve the pressure off my stomach. And at that point, I think that weekend I started feeling dizzy. I had really bad vertigo, which is just like I would be walking and all of a sudden like I couldn't tell what was up, down. I would just like the world would be like spinning, so I'd have to like sit down. That happened several times. And then I was also keeping track of my blood pressure because I had been seeing these like white, bright, like light spots that were kind of like long and skinny. They looked like silver confetti, like long silver confetti, like out of the corner of my eye. Usually when I saw those, I would be really hot, I would be really sick feeling, and then they would go away. So I was using a home blood monitor cup to keep track of that. On Saturday, my nausea and my fatigue kind of took over. I ended up throwing up for a lot of Saturday. Sunday and Monday, I was just, you know, I was just feeling out of sorts. And one of the things that I remember talking to my husband about was that I truly felt like I was having an out-of-body experience when I was feeling as sick as I was. My friends left from visiting Monday night, and I remember coming home and taking my blood pressure, and it was all over the place. Like, it was in the 150s, 140s, 130s, and then back into the 140s. I also, again, started feeling like I literally was like out of my own body. Like, I did not feel like myself. I felt like I was almost sitting next to myself. Like, that's the only way that I can describe it, and that's the way I had to describe it to the doctors. Like, it was like vertigo, like, and then I was just like over here. Like, I just felt out of my own body, and I was not feeling well. However, this was on Labor Day. This was September 2nd. It had the day off, and so after we went to the airport, I came home, I had taken my blood pressure, and I decided like maybe I should call someone because I had texted some friends and family and they were like, you need to call somebody. I called my OB office. They have after hours nurses, and I had kind of read off the numbers I was getting. Even though they were kind of off, she said that the best thing to do would be to go into the OB triage at the hospital just to get it checked. So I remember telling my husband, well, we're gonna go. It's like, I think at 7 or 8 o'clock at night at this point, but they're just gonna send me home and I'm gonna feel really stupid because my blood pressure is gonna be fine when I go. On my way there, I was kind of like pretty sure still that I was going home. But again, I just wasn't feeling right. I was feeling so like not myself. I checked in at the OB and we took my blood pressure, and even though it was high in the triage, they hooked me up to the NST machine, which is the 2 baby heart monitors for twin A and twin B, and then also a contraction monitor. And although my blood pressure wasn't super high, it was a little bit elevated. It was the first time that it had ever been elevated like while a doctor was checking. And the nurse had like asked other symptoms I was having, obviously the little bright lights. I had peed in a cup, no protein in my urine though. So at one point she had like written down my symptoms and she's like, have you ever been tested for preeclampsia? And I was like, no, because I never had any signs. Like I never had bad blood pressure when I was at the doctor's office, and I never had protein in my urine, which is what kind of tells them to look further into the other symptoms. And I guess there's like other things that tell you you have it, but those are done with a blood test, and they only usually do the blood test when you have the signs of having it. So she looked through my file and said that last time I was there that there had been some stuff that had been discussed about potentially maybe that I could have had it, but the blood tests were never run. And so she actually drew the blood and sent it off. By the time my doctor came to check me, I was actually having consistent contractions, but I feel like I might have been so out of it that I wasn't really feeling them. I had been having so many Braxton Hicks contractions as I was going along, like it was almost like it was just like back of my mind, but I was actually in active labor. So I came in, they checked me, I was at 1.5 centimeters dilated. By the time that was the nurse, by the time the doctor came in with to check me, I was at 2 centimeters, and basically he was like, you're in active labor and we're basically going to have the babies tonight. They're big and strong enough, you've had the steroid shot. And also, like, as bad as I was feeling, when my labs came back, the nurse came in and she's like, you have eclampsia. And I'm like, I have preeclampsia? She's like, no, you have like eclampsia. So they had just not had the signs before to check me, but I had through the blood test apparently, and I'm not sure what they look for. I know there's several things that say that you have it, and apparently I checked those boxes. So we immediately went into a birthing suite, and this is where things become a whirlwind. We went into the birthing suite. I immediately was asked, like, you know, both boys are head down, do you want to deliver vaginally? They put me on Pitocin to speed up the contractions. The only way to cure eclampsia or preeclampsia or any of that stuff is to go into labor. Like, once the babies are out, that's how your body heals from that. Before that, there's nothing really they can do. So I wanted to deliver vaginally. However, because we have multiples, no matter what happens, my doctor asked that you do an epidural line. And even if you only have the very minimum medicine going through, just because if something happens and you have to go to an emergency C-section and there's not time for you to get an epidural, they then have to put you under general anesthesia, and then you would be out and like basically asleep while your babies came into the world. And I just wasn't willing, no matter what happened, to take that chance, because, you know, like I want to see them come out. Like, so I got the epidural. That was like really not that bad at all. You like hunch over and they give you like a numbing shot, which kind of feels like a bee sting. And then you get the epidural put in, which just feels like a really strong pressure of someone like running their finger up along your spine. Then they tape you up and you're good to go. Like, it was really nothing. I had kind of been scared because other people said it was like horrible, and it really was like not that bad. So if you're scared of the epidural, just know that I felt like it was almost nothing besides a little bee sting and a little bit of weird pressure. I also then got a catheter put in because we would be, you know, I'm pretty sure like once you have the epidural in, you're not supposed to walk around. And then this is kind of where things get fuzzy. So I started feeling really, really ill. They were taking my blood pressure. They drew another round of vitals, and sometime in like an hour, people came rushing in and basically said, like, my doctor was like, this is basically our options. You're not dilating fast enough. Your levels and your health somehow in the blood work came back. It was getting worse. My liver and kidneys were starting to fail, or I'm pretty sure they were failing at that point, or maybe they were starting to. And so they asked if, I would be okay to, basically the best option at that point for the safety of me and the safety of the boys would be to have an emergency C-section. Somewhere in there, I also, my blood pressure started rising really quickly, and I'm not sure that's what had them do another vital draw or my blood draw, but at that point I started like feeling kind of disoriented. I remember not really, like, I think Matt told me I threw up at some point. They were putting me on magnesium to control the blood pressure that was like kind of like creeping up, and that's when I started feeling kind of sick. I think that's when I started throwing up. And then that's when I started getting the shakes. Like, I felt like my hands were just like trembling uncontrollably. My body was trembling uncontrollably. I don't know if that's an effect of the magnesium, but I'll tell you, the magnesium also made me feel like even more disoriented than I was already. And it kind of made me feel like even sicker. However, it was necessary to keep my blood pressure under control. So at this point, we're getting ready for the C-section. Things are pretty blurry. A lot of this stuff was like kind of repeated back to me from my husband. I remember being wheeled towards the operating room. My husband got in a like head to toe operating gown. And what's really funny is he's about exactly the same height as our delivering doctor. And because like they're in a full mask, cap, and then gown, I actually like kept getting confused as to like why my doctor was like over here. And then I would realize, like, my husband was like, it's me, babe, it's okay. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Like, I kept thinking like the doctor was over here, and I was like, where's my husband? And he was just like right there. So I get into surgery. They begin giving me the numbing stuff where they like either put cold water or cold air and ask you where you can feel it to. And then obviously as the medicine numbs you from further up, they start the surgery. At this point, I do remember like shaking uncontrollably. I remember feeling a lot of pressure as they were cutting the babies out. At one point, I was like, are you guys like doing this, or like is anything happening? They're like, oh, we're already in, we're taking the babies out. And that's when I was not feeling that great, and I was shaking uncontrollably. I had like 2 nurses helping hold me down, and I didn't know this, but when you're on the operating table, you're actually like spread out like this. And so you're kind of like on your back with your arms out, and I felt like I was like bouncing off the table. I was shaking so bad. But what was really amazing was watching like the babies come out. My husband got to take photos. They were like, stand up, your babies are coming out, and take these photos. And he actually has the pictures of them like coming out of my stomach, which is crazy. And then they, I'm not really sure the events in order of this, but I know they clipped their cords, wiped them down, and brought them over to me. At this point, they're still working on me on the operating table, but I was able, like, my husband was able to put like the babies like on my face. I was still had to be laying out on the table, so they placed them on my chest. It was so beautiful, like they were just so soft. And but then I don't remember much afterwards. Like, this is where things get kind of like, I don't want to say like blacked out, but I really don't remember a lot of what happened. My husband said we went to the recovery suite, and then the boys were able to latch for a few minutes, and then in the recovery suite you normally stay for about an hour. I remember being in the recovery suite probably around 3 or 4 in the morning. They were born at 3, so I think we were in the recovery suite about 4. And then I remember opening my eyes again, and it was 8:30, and we were still there. At this point, I have heart monitors hooked to me. I have people talking about stabilizing me, a blood transfusion, which I ended up getting a plasma transfusion, I think, a blood plasma transfusion. But what had happened was my blood pressure went sky high. My, I guess your blood cells can burst. And again, I'm sorry if I'm not like super technical with this. When your blood pressure gets that high and then it releases potassium into your system, it can mess with your heart. So I ended up with a blood plasma transfusion. I woke up attached to heart monitors. I had like air on me still. Matt was there with the babies, and my doctor was basically introducing us to a internal medicine team, who then explained to me that we were dealing with HELLP syndrome. And HELLP syndrome is kind of like a spectrum where it's like on the really bad end of eclampsia or preeclampsia. My liver and kidneys had really taken a beating and had lots of damage from just, I guess, the syndrome itself. Like it causes damage to your liver and kidneys, and then also the extremely high blood pressure, the blood vessels or blood cells bursting, which is why I ended up with a blood transfusion. So all of that, I kind of remember. They were trying to explain how it worked to me. I was really out of it. We got moved eventually to a maternity suite floor with a internal medicine team, the OB team, and another team, and I can't remember what it was. I don't think it was a surgical team yet, but I also threw up on my doctor while he was explaining HELLP syndrome to me, which was super embarrassing. And I appreciate doctors and nurses for all they do, because it was such a mess. But it was also like, you know, I know it's a part of their job, but like that was, of all the things that happened to me during that time, that was probably the most embarrassing. And then, so the boys actually needed no NICU time, no no tubes, no breathing help, no feeding help. They were really healthy and really good to go. So they were in our room. We got moved to a bigger room eventually because of the two babies. And at that point, we were still doing blood draws about every 2 to 4 hours. That continued from the first day to the second day. By day 3, I felt like I was doing better. However, I was still getting blood draws every 4 hours about. So I know that they were still concerned about my blood pressure, since it still wasn't really going down. It was still kind of fluctuating. I know on day 3, when I thought I was doing well, I actually had a point where my blood pressure went skyrocketing again, which was really scary. I remember shaking uncontrollably. I was in and out of consciousness. There was probably 7 nurses and several doctors in my room. And I remember looking out and seeing my friends and family crying, and understanding for the first time that I was there that this was something really serious. I knew that I didn't feel well all this time, and I knew that I was dealing with HELLP syndrome, but I didn't really realize how serious it was. And so, or how sick I was. I felt awful. I actually couldn't even go to the bathroom by myself. I was unable to hold my own babies because for days I was shaking so bad that I was scared I was gonna drop them. So nurses or my husband would help me hold the baby, or put them in my gown so I could do skin to skin, because I couldn't physically hold them. So that's when I kind of realized things were really bad and really serious. The next day, day 3 in the hospital, full third day, or actually this is day 4, I ended up, being able to finally talk to a doctor and nurse and kind of more understand what was going on, what my body was going through, and the healing process. That really kind of put things in perspective for me. I, for the first time, was actually scared. I didn't realize how serious everything was. I knew I was sick, but I also realized that I wasn't going home right away. And I think that was something that hit me. We had been there for over 72 hours. I'm thinking, okay, this is the time you get discharged. And they're talking that's not even an option. And so that's kind of when I started to get worried. I started asking the doctors how serious is this? And they're like, well, this is obviously serious. We're doing everything we can. And then that's when my colon, I don't want to say it became enlarged. I know that it stopped functioning at full capacity, and my digestive tract shut down, and that was a result of the trauma from the C-section and the birth. That caused a whole nother gambit of problems, including a bacterial infection and excruciating pain where I was just like, I could barely like lay on my side. I also was throwing up again. So this is when my doctor finally sent Matt and the boys home and wanted me to stay at the hospital and be there just fully immersed in trying to get better. I was not sleeping because obviously we had the babies in the room. I wanted to be with them. I wanted to nurse them. I wanted to hold them. But my doctor determined that with the potential bacterial infection and the fact that like my intestines weren't working, it can cause even worse things down the line if we didn't get it working. I had an x-ray and CT scan, and it showed like these huge pockets of air in my stomach where like things were just not going anywhere. So that's when Matt and the babies went home, and that was probably, out of everything that happened to me, that was the hardest. Like, I was devastated. I cried for like 2 straight days, like in between every blood draw, every vital check, every meal. Like, all I wanted was to be with my babies, and I couldn't be. It was, like I said, like of all the pain, all the things that happened. I mean, literally, I had so many blood draws, they ran out of like places to stick me that weren't like blown out already. And my arms were like bruised from my hand all the way up to my inside of my elbow. And like, it was painful, but like nothing was more painful than being separated from my family at that point. So that's when I was just like, no matter what, I just want to get healthy. I want to be like, I want to get out of here as soon as possible. I remember asking like Friday, like on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday, like, when can I go home? Do you think it's today? And they were always very honest, like, no, I think it's going to be a couple more days. And while that was kind of devastating, like, I just knew, okay, like if I have 2 more days, like I'm going to just get as well as I can. And, you know, I asked as many questions as possible and did everything the doctors asked of me, tried to walk as much as possible, tried to, you know, eat the things they wanted me to eat, and, you know, do the liquids they wanted me to do, just so I could get out of there and be home with my babies. So after a couple of days of that, my digestive tract started working again. My levels for my kidney and my liver and my blood count were basically on enough of a trajectory to be healed enough for me to leave. And so that following Monday, I was discharged from the hospital. They sent home the meds I needed to continue to heal, and I was able to go home. I want to say that these nurses and doctors that took care of me, I had to have seen 25 different nurses and doctors over the course of being at the hospital. Between the surgical team that was watching my intestines and my colon, the internal medicine team that was monitoring my liver, kidney, and blood health, the OB team who was monitoring my C-section recovery and my postpartum like recovery, and then of course the just so many, like 10, 15 nurses that I saw around the clock as we stayed that entire 8 days. I can't even express how amazing the medical staff was. And I have such a deep appreciation for not only like the knowledge and the care, but like the compassion and empathy that they had. Like, they always were like rooting for me, saying, you're gonna go home, we know it. Like, or like when they were leaving for a shift, like, I hope you feel better, I hope I don't see you next time on my next shift. And when they would see me, they'd say, okay, we're gonna do everything, we're gonna get you out of here, and we won't see you the next shift. So, you know, on top of like keeping me healthy and basically keeping me alive, they also kept my spirits up. At this point too, my husband is home with 2 brand new infants who are only 4 days old. He called and checked on me constantly, and that also helped motivate me to get better. And so like, I super appreciate everything that the hospital did, as well as like what my husband did. All of that was super motivating, and, you know, really helped me just like do everything I could to get out of there as quickly as I could. On top of that, I definitely would say like there were things that happened to me that I thought were going to be a big deal, and now I look back and I'm like, that's not even a big deal. Like the catheter, that was probably one of the best things about being in the hospital, not having to get up to pee 50 times a night, because once you've been pregnant and fully pregnant, like, you understand going to the bathroom every 20 minutes. That catheter was amazing. Maybe I'm the only person who feels that way, but for the first time in like 6 months, I didn't have to pee every 5 minutes. And if I was, I didn't know it. The other thing is I used to have a really bad fear of needles and blood draws. That kind of went out the window. It's not great, but at that point, like, I had so many blood draws, it just became like whatever. And then I also was like worried I would be embarrassed to like pee or use the bathroom or shower in front of like someone I didn't know, but the nurses were so kind because I couldn't actually shower on my own. I was too shaky and unstable, so I had to take a chair shower and had someone shower me. And like, surprisingly enough, when I thought it would be weird or like awkward and I would feel embarrassed, all I could feel was grateful that this like nurse was like taking care of me in this way, like washing my hair so I could feel like a human being. And so yeah, I just have such a deep appreciation for like nurses now, doctors too, but like I think nurses are so underappreciated. And like in the postpartum care process, they kept my spirits up. They obviously took care of me, gave me my meds, fed me, encouraged me, like helped me with everything. And I guess like I've never been in the hospital overnight, much less for 8 days, so I didn't really know like all that goes into being a nurse. But I have friends who are nurses, and now I feel like you guys are like superheroes. Like, it is incredible. So yeah, so then I came home. I was able to take my meds at home. The journey after birth was kind of up and down. I'm getting better this way, but there's little dips here and there. And so I'm just really excited to be home still. I'm so happy for the team of doctors and nurses that took care of me, that allowed me to be home. I wouldn't say that this was like a great birth story. It wasn't the birth. Well, it's a great birth story because I have 2 beautiful babies and I made it back alive and healthy. But, it wasn't the birth I planned for. It wasn't the vaginal delivery I planned for. It wasn't the get in, get out, be home with your babies that I planned for. But I will say that, I didn't know about HELLP syndrome. I didn't know about, a lot about the risks and things that can happen. I knew all the risks that were for the babies being multiples, but I didn't really know about all the risks to mom. And I'm so happy I had the care that I had. And I hope that this raises awareness for people who may have symptoms that they don't understand or feel things that they don't, understand about their body. I kept telling myself like, oh, it's just you're super pregnant, you're just uncomfortable. But at some points I kept thinking, well, maybe something isn't right. And I really believe in listening to your body. I also believe in listening to your husband and friends who tell you to stop trying to tough it out and go ask somebody and go to the hospital and do what you need to do. So I hope that this raises a little bit of awareness for HELLP syndrome. Like I said, I never heard of it before. I'm still healing and recovering. It'll be 6 weeks next week, I think, and we'll have the blood draws to see like if my liver and kidneys are back up to 100%. They should be. I've been feeling a ton better. But yeah, that's my birth story. And, as messy and crazy and hectic and scary as it was, I still think it's beautiful. I'll never forget seeing the boys come out of my stomach. I'm just so happy how everything played out. The boys are healthy. I'm healthy now. And, we don't always get the birth story we expected, but we still get the miracle, and that's what makes it special. Thank you guys. Please leave any questions below. I know I kind of skimmed through a lot. There was so much, and this is already such a long vlog, but I will answer any questions you have about it or what I can help answer questions about. And of course, as always, subscribe if you want to continue following my postpartum journey with the twins, and like this video if this is the type of content you want to see. It helps tell me basically if you guys are enjoying this or not. Until next time, thank you for tuning in and listening to my twin birth story. Bye guys.